Okay, so unfortunately, uh, some things have come up. Some information has come out, which I've been tracking now for a couple months. And it's becoming more and more obvious to me that we have a problem. So, this is kind of I suppose it is best if I just lay out the data points and let you make your own mind up what you think you would make of these data points. But it seems to be a very serious situation, and it's one that not too many people have picked up on yet. So, my premise, my conclusions at this time is that there's an active effort to poison um, most of the people in the United States, which sounds really far out and wacky um, until you look at the data, and you may choose not to believe it or not. That's your business. However, if I'm correct, you might wish to take that into consideration. Um, be aware of that fact. Basically, what's happened is several months or a couple months ago, it came to my attention that local to me here in Pennsylvania, that there were reports coming in from the Amish and Mennonite communities. And some of these reports were very concerning. Essentially, what they were saying was that something's very wrong, that the rain, the food, and the water were being poisoned. And that every time it rained, there were Amish people getting sick. Many of them then got very sick, and some of them were dying. Okay, interesting. But, why only the Amish communities? So I didn't really take it very seriously at first, or I took it seriously, but I'm not part of the Amish communities. I'm not part of the Mennonite communities. Um, so they weren't asking for my help. They wouldn't accept my help probably. So it was not a major concern to me at the time. However, about 2 months ago, I also had a couple friends. They got very, very sick. They got sick with an upper respiratory condition. One of them ended up with a fever of like 104, something like that. And they were talking to me and saying, do you have any clue what to do with this sort of severe thing? Aside from go to the hospital, do you have any clue what to do? And so I started saying, well, when did you get sick? What were you exposed to? Explain to me what's going on. So I have, I have no idea. I mean, it's probably a virus. Treat it like you would a virus, Um, but they started telling me it's like, well, it happened right after a rainstorm, and that it initiated as if it was an allergy. It seemed to trigger an allergic reaction in at least one of the people involved. And that they kind of got the sniffles from it. They started to get nasal drip. And this advanced into a respiratory infection, and then it started to get very serious. And they got a very high fever, and it was very serious. One of them did end up in the hospital briefly. However, after discussing, thoughts on the issue, they took actions on their own behalf that helped to reverse the condition. And they managed to come out of the hospital, even though things were looking pretty bad. So kudos to them. So this is, again, concerning, but I didn't have enough to really base any information on. It's starting to show me a pattern, that there was a pattern going on, that people were getting sick. And these are people who have not received the, stick in the arm. The Amish have not. The Mennonites have not. My friends have not. I have not. So the thing is that this is not a virus. The obvious immediate go-to, especially if you believe the normal narrative, is that obviously it's a virus. It's the Delta or whatever. The thing is, it's not a virus. And that it does not appear to be an allergen either, even though it triggers an allergic-like reaction, whatever it is. It is a toxin. And I know this partially because I've studied, primitive diagnostics. Being a survival person, being somebody who studied survival medicine, ditch medicine, backwoods medicine, and so on, I've tried to learn diagnostic skills that can be used in primitive situations when you don't have access to a hospital. So, while that's not ideal, it's not as nice as having x-rays or, CT scans or whatever. You need to be able to figure out what you're dealing with in order to be able to deal with it. So if somebody gets sick out in the bush and you're 3 days from the hospital, what do? Well, you're going to have some idea what you're trying to do before you try to do anything. Otherwise, you could actually make things worse. So you need to learn some diagnostic stuff. And the difference between different kinds of infections versus other things, there's certain signs. There's certain symptoms. And they follow a certain pattern. And so, as I was talking to my friends originally, and they were describing what had happened to me, and they were assuming it was an allergy. It was an allergy attack. The problem was we were getting kind of late in the year. Now, when they fell sick, there were things around that they could have been allergic to. I think that was kind of a little after ragweed season. But, there's still some things lingering in the fall that they could have been allergic to and so forth. So there could have been mold. It was rainy, so there could have been some mold issues. There could have been stuff that may have triggered an allergic reaction. Of course, who knows if they just suddenly were developing some sort of a sensitivity or something like that to laundry detergent or whatever. But that didn't seem to be the case. And the thing was that one of the diagnostics that you can look to is the color of mucus. So if somebody is coughing or sneezing or if their nose is running, you can look at the color. And the color and consistency tells you certain things about what's going on. So, for instance, if it's white, it's an infection of some kind. Probably viral, but an infection of some kind. If it's yellow, it's an infection. It's a bacterial infection. It's a viral infection. If it's dark, kind of shading towards a dark green or a dark yellow brown, it's a very powerful infection. If it's greenish, it is probably a fungus. If it is kind of very brown in color, it is kind of a dusty brown or a dirty brown, it might be a dust or particulate issue. If it's dark brown specks, that's bleeding within the lungs. If the mucus is deep brown or black, that means there's severe bleeding within the lungs, and you got a serious problem. You need to get to the hospital yesterday. There's all these different things that you can check. The normal color of your mucus is clear. It should be clear. And so, as I was saying to them, they were saying, well, we're having all this problem and so on. And so one of the first questions I asked was, what color was the mucus? Lovely, lovely, polite conversation. And they said, it's clear. And I said, still? At first it was clear, and it stayed clear. And now they were reporting upper respiratory distress and, coughing and phlegm coming out of their lungs. And I said, well, what color is it? And they said, it's still clear. So this would be considered very unusual. This would be saying that it's not a fungus, it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria. And other things they were describing about secondary symptoms that were not allergy symptoms showed a pattern that is consistent with the toxic exposure of some kind. Now, of course, I can't prove that. I don't have testing facilities. I don't have a way of sampling. I'm just saying, based on the patterns that, as I've learned them, a pattern of what you might associate with a virus, or a pattern you might associate with a bacterium, or a pattern that you might associate with allergies, or whatever, that the pattern didn't fit any of those. It was consistent with toxic exposure, exposure to some sort of an inhaled toxin. So, obviously at that point it had developed into an infection in their lungs, and they were very, very sick. And so I, said, here's what you're going to need to do, and here's what you're going to need to monitor. And if it gets past this point, if you get over that 103 fever, you need to go to the hospital. There's nothing you can do at that point. You need to go to the hospital. If your lips start turning blue, you need to go to the hospital. All these sorts of things. And they were very close to that point, and one of my friends did end up in the hospital. So this is the sort of issue, and that caught my attention. One of my friends could have easily passed away, and from this situation, it was very, very bad. And as he started to pull himself out of this, it relapsed. And there was a bacterial pneumonia, and all the signs of a cytokine storm developed. And that's the cytokine storm is what put him in the hospital. And, while there's ways to address cytokine storms in the bush, it requires herbs that are not easily or readily available. So, there was really no thing. I said, hey, look, you just need to go to hospital at this point. At the same time, some of the efforts that he was already taking managed to get him through the situation. So that was very concerning. But at the same time, I still was unsure what we were looking at. It got my attention, though. The fact that it is not a virus, and it is not a bacteria, and it is not an allergy caught my attention. The fact that it was in the air, that one of my friends said, it absolutely was. I was outside, and there was wind, and the rain was coming in, and suddenly I felt this stuff, and it hit me, and I had an allergic type reaction, and that's where this whole thing started. That, along with the idea that it was actually some kind of a toxin, was very concerning. So I knew a few other people who started having respiratory issues, but they didn't necessarily advance it seriously. And again, hey, it's a time. It's a time for flus, seasonal flus, and everyone's concerned about stuff right now. I didn't necessarily think very much of it. Just kind of keeping track of it, but not really seriously thinking too much of it. And then I got hit. And the advantage of me getting hit is that I was actually able to pay very close attention to how my body reacted. And the interesting thing was I sleep with my window open almost all the time. Throughout the summer, throughout the spring, fall, pretty much unless it's seriously below freezing, and even sometimes if it is below freezing, I leave my window open. I like to stay used to, and I like to stay used to being in the environment and having the changes of temperature and so on, being exposed to that. So I leave my window open. Or I did. And so one night I was sleeping. I had, I interact with very few people. I wasn't around anyone who's sick. I come in physical contact with people rarely. So, while it's certainly not impossible I was exposed to something, sure. At the same time, what happened was that while I was sleeping, I suddenly started to develop allergy-like symptoms. And I know this because my body has a particular reaction to certain allergens. And one of them is I get a very strong drying of the throat, and particularly of the soft palate. And my soft palate will retreat. It will actually pull up. And my uvula and my soft palate will feel very constricted and very irritated. And this is a telltale sign of an allergy. And I've had this with certain molds and stuff. And so this happened while I was asleep, and then mucus production started, and all my sinuses and my throat and progressively my throat started to feel as if they had been scorched. And this was very, very concerning. So when I got up, I was like, okay, this is strange. I was in a bad way. I was suffering pretty hard. And I started to try to figure out. By this time, we're talking within the last 2 weeks. And I started to say, okay, well, this is an allergic reaction. Or this has this telltale signs that I would associate with allergic reaction in my body. It's in my room with the window open. When I went out into the rest of the house, the symptoms started to abate. I didn't have them. I didn't sense them as strongly. When I went out around the community, I didn't necessarily feel a problem. The one exception was when I went to the big box stores. And in the big box stores, I again started to feel irritation. But everywhere else, it wasn't so bad. Come back into my room, and I started having problems again. So my first thing was to examine my room and try to find anything that I could be allergic to. So it's too late in the year. It was not a flower. It was not mold. It was not raining. It was not, there's no grass. There's no trees. It's all too late for all that sort of stuff. Allergy season should be over. So my first thought is, of course, maybe something's in my room. Maybe something has started to mold. Maybe there's, something going on and I need to examine. So I checked all the likely culprits, thoroughly investigated everything, could find nothing that would cause an allergic reaction. I looked outside the house, immediately around my window, could find nothing that might cause an allergic reaction. Well, recognizing that, and I should say, is that as things developed, is like the mucus was clear. So this is a little bit unusual. Again, I recognize that this scorched sensation that was in my sinuses left me wide open for an infection. When the cells are damaged and so on, an infection can easily take hold. Knowing that, I took measures to boost my immune system through herbal means, and I made sure my vitamins and everything were way up and ready to combat it. Taking that tack, it did kind of get down into my throat. I had a sore throat for a couple of days, had to get some cough drops and stuff like that to deal with that. However, it stopped at that point. And over the next 3 days, I slowly recovered from whatever the hell it was. And it did not progress to an upper respiratory infection in my case. However, I felt really awful. And the thing was, again, is it was very strange that it was just in the room. So I realized that it was coming in through the window. I started to shut the window, and the problem went away. Since that time, it has come back. The irritation, and I can kind of use my this allergic reaction as a metric. Especially at this time of year where there's not a lot of allergens around. I can use this as a metric. And I can kind of use this as a sensing device as whether there's an irritant in the air or not. And there'll be like 3 to 5 days where it's not around, and then suddenly it will be back. Now, because I have now closed my window, I have not run into it very heavily since then. But I began to understand that it was in the air. It was definitely something that was in the air. And that it was unlikely to be an allergen of any kind. Because, there's no natural cause of an allergen available. Plus, if it was a mold, there should have been this little spike in it, and then it should have ebbed away. Or it should have been continuous. And there was a spike, and then nothing, and then a spike, and then nothing, and then another spike, and then nothing. And that is a very unusual pattern. That doesn't match flowers, that doesn't match mold, that doesn't match anything like that to have these periodic spikes. That's totally unusual for an allergy. Especially when I spend all my time in basically the same environment. If I was allergic to something within that environment, I've just developed an allergy to something in the environment or so on, I should be running into it regularly because I am in the same place all the time. I basically, live in a room and, use some areas commonly, the same ones every day, all the time, in the same place every day, all the time, consistently. So there's no variation where I might have been around something for a while and then I'm not. So if it was like laundry detergent, or if it was soap, or if it was cleaning products, or if it was, food products, I eat a lot of the same foods all the time. I would be exposed to it on a daily basis, not every 3 to 5 days. There was nothing that made sense of that. So I began to understand that whatever this was, it was in the air. And it wasn't consistently there. It was there sometimes and not there other times. And this strongly hinted towards some kind of intentional encouragement, some sort of spraying. This was my theory. That's the only thing I could think of. It's like, well, something's got to be putting it into the air. And if it's not the trees, it's not grass, it's not mold, and it's not a chemical substance. I don't use very much in the way of chemicals. Most everything I use is very clean and natural. Even though I don't have allergy issues, I tend to like to be simple, and I tend to like to approach things from the basic. So, like, the soaps I use are plain Castile, unscented Castile soap. So forth and so on. I don't use a lot of fabric softener. I don't use a lot of that. I keep things very simple, very plain. So I'm not surrounded by fragrances. I'm not surrounded by chemicals of that kind. So it would be very unreasonable to assume that these products suddenly are issues, which for other people you really could blame it on that. And so all of a sudden I start to hear these other stories, and again, hearing about the Amish, and they're saying, look, every time it rains. Now, what I saw was that it did not correspond with the rain. At least, even though my friend got sick, started to get sick when it rained, even though the Amish were claiming they got sick when it rained. When I first got it hit, it was not raining, and in fact, actually 2 days later, when it finally did rain, it actually seemed to knock the stuff out of the air, and things got cleaned up a lot better, and I felt a lot better after that. There's other periods of rain after that where it did not happen. There were periods where it did happen, and so it did not correlate, in my experience, with the rain. Not to say that it couldn't come in the rain, just saying that in my own experiences, it did not come in the rain when I sensed it. So, I also then, my friends, their son got sick, and he got very sick. Same stuff again, clear mucus. Started as a nasal thing, progressed to his throat, progressed to his lung, turned into an infection. Very sick. Goes to the hospital. Put on oxygen, not a ventilator, but oxygen. Conference of people saying, what do you think? And I say, this is starting to form a pattern. Has he had the shot? No, he has not. Okay. What are other possibilities? So on. It's like, this sounds exactly like what y'all had. Sounds exactly like what I had. This is getting a little concerning. He's in a position where, by that point, his death was probably pretty damn likely. After discussing it, my friends managed to take issue into their own hands, did what they'd done for themselves and for their son, and the condition began to reverse, began to clear up. He's still not out of the hospital. He's been in the hospital for 3 weeks straight. He's still not out of the hospital, but he is consistently improving. The doctors are shocked. The doctors don't know what to do because they don't know what my friends did. They kept it secret because they knew that this would not be approved of, kind of thing. So what they did, they consulted with him, and it was his choice to do it, and so forth. But what they did has alleviated the condition, has reversed the condition where he was going down, he was going to die. And he's not now. At least not at the moment. So this was odd. Then we get another report from the Amish community saying people are dying. A lot of people are dying of this same stuff. It comes in the air, triggers an allergy-like reaction, clear mucus, develops into a sore throat, upper respiratory infection, pneumonia, and death. And that they felt that it was in the water, the food, and the air. And consistently, that's how they tracked it. Then I find out my nephew has it. So my nephew, he have deep coughing in the lungs, and so they call me and say, he's really suffering. What do you think? Describe the symptoms. Started with a runny nose, clear mucus, irritated throat, upper respiratory infection, consistent over several weeks, a lot of coughing, still clear mucus, but as he started to get deep coughing, because I suggested some things that encourage expectoration, as he got to deep coughing, then it was this very deep yellow-brown mucus that started to come up, which of course denotes an actual infection, probably varying towards a bacterial infection. Not necessarily, but probably. And in fact, a lot of the symptoms kind of pointed to, and that's been consistent with all these people, from my friends to their son, to anyone I've heard reporting this, is actually the lung problems seem to be bacterial, not viral. My friend who was in the hospital, he had a culture done, and they were claiming it was both viral and bacterial. I think that it was purely bacterial, because they didn't actually isolate what it was. They found bacteria. They didn't isolate viral. They just said viral because they thought it was viral. The presentation, though, was bacterial pneumonia. So we're not talking about a virus necessarily. There's no clear and obvious evidence that a virus is involved in this in any way, shape, or form. It appears to be a toxin that creates the conditions that allows a bacterial infection to take hold. There may be more to it than that, but I don't know. So, telling my brother and his son about what my friend and their son had experienced and what I've heard from the Amish and from various different, and what I personally experienced, I said, well, here's this pattern that's forming up, and here's what people have done, and here's how it's responded, and so on. So just so you know, and I'm thinking that this seems to be fitting the pattern. So, whatever you want to do. They take action on their own behalf, and the results are that within 4 days the coughing clears up, the whole thing starts to reverse, and so forth. So, very happy, very grateful, and so forth. Then along comes just the other day, and on the 19th of November is Dedication Day down in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And that's the day that Abraham Lincoln came to give the Gettysburg Address and to dedicate the cemetery, the soldiers' cemetery at Gettysburg as a national monument, and a monument to the people who fought there at the battle. So it's a big thing. Now, last year, very few people showed up and everything because of all the crazy shit that was going on. This year, a lot of people showed up. I was down there, and, I go down there, I drive family members down there. While they're down there, I go ghost hunting, So it's, I'm aware of the whole thing, but I go out in the field and try to see what I can stir up, what kind of trouble I can get into. But whatever the case was, I was down there. And actually, I think it may have been on the 20th, because it was on the Saturday. And while we were there, I should say that this report, along with all these other things that have been coming in, I've been getting reports from truck drivers of seeing unusual plane activity over a lot of the major cities in the United States, from in the areas that they run, which is primarily Pennsylvania out through Wyoming, Nebraska, Montana, Colorado, along I-80, basically. And so along the I-80 run, over places like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Chicago, and other places like that, they'd notice unusual plane activity, and that these planes were laying down contrails that were of the most unusual nature. And now, whether you believe in chemtrails or not, well, number one, if you don't understand what they are, you haven't been paying attention. Number two, if you don't believe them, you're a frickin' idiot who hasn't considered the actual evidence. Because there's abundant evidence that is horrifically clear that it's a thing. So if you ever actually gave it any effort to look into it, you would understand that, yes, weather manipulation through the introduction of particulates into the atmosphere is a thing, and it has been a thing since a long, long, long time. And that, yes, there are planes that do stuff like that. Well, these planes, in the past, there's a certain pattern that's been noted by people who watch this. So you'll have your, cityscape somewhere in the United States. And what before, back during the Obama years and prior to that, people who are watching this would watch as several planes would start to lay down grid forms to the outside of the city, to the west of the city. And then these grid forms would slowly become an overcast sky, and that overcast sky would head off to the east over top of the city. And these were at, substantial heights as far as, where the, where these were being sprayed. During the Trump years, that mostly came to an end. That mostly stopped. And we haven't seen it during that time period. So as I'm sitting down in Gettysburg, I should say, the truck drivers were reporting to me, it's like, hey, now we're in Chicago, and we're seeing, sitting here in traffic, looking at Chicago, and so forth, we're seeing airplanes, we're watching them in the sky, and they are dropping their mats, very obviously, at a low altitude right over the cities. This is new. This is unusual. And we're getting a lot of these reports. Humongous number of these reports suddenly. Well, not sure what to think of that. It's unusual. So now I'm down in Gettysburg this last weekend. And as we're sitting there in, and there's hundreds of reenactors and different people coming and taking part in all this and so on, what do? But I'm sitting there because I was the driver, and so I'm sitting with the car. And as I'm sitting in the car, I'm watching a plane laying down very clearly, very parallel line grid map. It started out looking like that across the sky. It was partially cloudy. There was little clouds here and there, but despite the little bit of clouds, you could very clearly see these very close parallel lines. And this was not at a great height. This is probably at less than 50,000 feet. Probably between 20 and 30,000 feet. And the lines were fairly close together. They were maybe a mile apart. Something like that. Very close together. And then as things progressed and as people continued to, as things wore on into the day and more people showed up, I was actually able to watch the planes drawing these patterns, going back and forth, drawing grids in the sky, and then I saw at least 2 of the planes, and they were doing this back and forth, laying down that pattern. And actually, it was a triple thing. So it was they first laid down one stripe, and then there was approximately maybe 1,000 feet above that would be a perpendicular stripe, and then about 1,000 feet of that there was another stripe going in the same direction as the original. So there was, you could tell from looking at it that it looked more or less like that, where there was a lower one and there was a top one and then there was a central ones. And I watched the planes go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth across the sky. And of course, this is what I would call unusual aircraft behavior. I pointed it out to various people. They also felt that it was very unusual behavior. Things completed, tasks completed down there. We left fairly early. And leaving the Gettysburg area, getting approximately 10 miles outside of Gettysburg, it was gone. That pattern was gone. There no longer was there. It had been placed specifically and directly right over Gettysburg, with hundreds of people showing up at that time. So then the question was, what was that? I had started to feel a little irritated. And as I came home, I felt very off again. I actually went to take a nap because I felt so off. And sure enough, the rawness in my nose and throat started to develop yet again. It also occurred in my father, who was there, and a couple other people that also noticed that they had also gotten the same exact irritation. And this is not people that were all bunched together. These were people who were there separately and in dispersed areas, and they all had the same reaction, all immediately after being in Gettysburg that weekend. So I cannot say that correlation equals causation, but I can say it's damn suspicious. I am now comfortable saying that it is my opinion, it is my analysis of this situation. And I should say that we've heard from the Amish again, and they're basically losing their shit. People are dying, and a lot of people are dying from this, whatever the hell this is. It's killing a lot of people. Now, it would be very easy to blame people, make wild accusations about who's doing what. Now, admittedly, if it does correlate to the planes and this unusual plane activity, well, who the hell owns planes? There's only so many. It's going to be a corporation, it's going to be the military, it's going to be the government. There's not very many people who own planes. There's not many people who can get permission to do this sort of weird activity in flight paths. This was definitely not normal air traffic. I've been down to Gettysburg for 30 some odd years. Never seen it. Not ever. This was bizarre. So, you can draw your own conclusions, whatever you want to think about that unusual airplane activity. You can choose to believe whether those were contrails or not, though they were at extremely low altitude, which argues against that. They, of course, looked very strange. They did start to just fan out into an overcast sky. They were bizarre. And then people started to have reactions. So, I feel it is not unreasonable to come out and say, be careful. Keep an eye on your skies. Look for unusual plane activity. Understand that people are running into this sort of thing. It can be staved off early. Now, the herbs that I personally used were things like elderberry and chaga, and I, of course, loaded up on vitamin D, vitamin C, stuff like that. Simple, normal stuff you would do to fight a flu or cold or any sort of thing like that. Elderberry helps to especially with respiratory issues, and it stimulates the immune system and all that sort of stuff. And chaga is an immune modulator and enhancer and so on, so it helps to boost the immune system. Like I said, when I felt the rawness, I knew I didn't have an infection because the mucus was clear. So I knew it was something else, some other irritant. But I knew that once I had that rawness, that an infection was extremely likely. And so I just took those measures that I would normally do to fight any infection that I might come across. That stopped it in its tracks. And, normal course of healing, take 2 or 3 days, 4 days to heal, but normal course of healing, I just got over it. I just got over it. Those who have not, it gets fairly severe. Now, they have been using the I word, the horse dewormer, as it were. And everyone who's used that has cleared the condition and has reversed stuff when they probably ought to be dead. I should know, there's at least 3 to 4 people I know right now who should be dead right now, and they are not. And they took their own initiative to access this substance and to use it. So that seems to work. On the other hand, it doesn't seem to stop the cytokine storm. And so that even when those people had taken these things, a cytokine storm still resulted. And that was very severe. Now, none of them have tried this. I don't know if it'll work. The one thing I would say is that from bush medicine I know is that bical skullcap, which is called Chinese skullcap. It's Scutellaria bicalensis is the scientific name. Specifically, this herb is noted for being able to address cytokine storm issues in the wild, in the bush. So that would be, if you have a situation like that, that would be one approach to try to take. I know antihistamines, corticosteroids, have a tendency to work pretty well on this. Though I have not used that, and I don't know how to use that, but I know that people have, so they've used antihistamines and stuff like that. Whether that would work in this case or not, I'm not sure. But there is that sort of thing. Also, especially since it's very likely associated with a toxin, have been suggestions, and I have been using at least one of these aspects, is that I'm going to spell these wrong. Glutathione and N-N-acetylcysteine. N-N-acetylcysteine is more commonly known just by its abbreviation, NAC, NAC. Glutathione is an antioxidant substance that comes from plants. People use it for various different things. It can be found in supplement stores and stuff like that. It's considered safe. One of the things it does is to help antioxidize things. That's what it does. And so with toxin compounds, also, if it is a virus, it would be attacking the virus particles and helping to get them cleaned up, getting them to your liver and everything so you can get them out of the body. So glutathione has been used a lot for detox type stuff and protection from different exposures to damaging substances. And then the N-N-acetylcysteine is an amino acid. So it's something your body generates anyways. And it helps to kind of get these things that are from your liver and so on, gather them all up and get them out of the body. It also helps with cleaning the blood and cleansing the blood system and help to restore the blood system to health and so on. People have been using these in the current situation to excellent effect. I was able to find N-N-acetylcysteine, and I've been using it to, it has been helping. I've also started using, not glutathione, but I've been using C60 and olive oil. C16 EVOO. I've been using that, which is a powerful detoxer. I've just started using that. It definitely seems to help, because certainly after I came back from Gettysburg, I could feel grit in my eyes. I could feel, or felt like grit in my eyes. I could feel burning, dryness, and kind of grittiness in my eyes. I was definitely having a reaction to something. So I started hitting it with this, and between the two, between the knack and that experience has faded off. It has fallen away. So people are using those things. They have been all reporting pretty positive feelings from that, and at least certainly they are harmless in their, these are things that are readily available and considered harmless, safe. You can get the I was able to find the N-N-acetylcysteine at the local vitamin shop. I went to GNC and they said they will have it, but they're trying to get it, but they don't currently have it. I know people looked up, there's different supplement places online where they were able to see that they had it in stock. I hadn't actually looked for the glutathione, so I don't even know who has that, but probably the same people. I'd probably say GNC probably has glutathione. I'd probably say that Amazon has glutathione. Interestingly, the government has specifically requested to Amazon stop carrying NAC. And so they don't carry NAC anymore. So you have to go do a little bit more searching to find the source. However, that seems to have been helping people. Which also argues that we're talking about a toxin of some kind. Because that stuff shouldn't necessarily do anything to a virus. It'll help you recover, because after your body attacks the things, it breaks down the particles, and those particles could still cause damage and stuff like that. And this stuff will kind of help to clean them up and get them out of the body. So these different substances would probably be assisting in the recovery from, but it's not going to fight. There's nothing about them that fights an infection. Some there's like. They would calm down inflammation and swelling, but not in a they're not antimicrobial or antibacterial in any way, or antiviral in any way that I'm aware of. So these are not things that would fight that. So this is kind of what we know about it. I can't say anything definitive. This is a pattern that I've noticed. I've been tracking. My friend who ended up in the hospital, he's now been tracking it too and helping to pass information on to me. Most people aren't willing to consider this yet. It's not in their face enough. So a lot of people would say it's reactionary. I'm at the point where the only thing I can do from here would be to actually take air samples and send them in for analysis, to actually try to get physical evidence of the fact that something is in the air and exactly what it is. Unfortunately, that would require, ideally it would require a coordinated effort across large areas of the United States where, you would take samples during the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, in the night, and over a long period of time, over at least 7 days, and have them all analyzed and look for patterns. And then you'd want to see this done over in multiple locations all over the United States, particularly in the city, in the country, and different things like that, and try to find correlations. Well, that's expensive and it's involved, and I certainly don't have the resources to do that. If somebody else does, I'd be really fascinated to find out what the information is. Right now, it's circumstantial. We don't know that there's a clear relationship between the plane's behavior and people getting sick. There seems to be a relationship, but we can't say that there absolutely is. We can't say that, this is happening in that way. I think it's probably the case. It seems consistent. All information from all parties point to that as probably the most likely idea or explanation, but that doesn't prove a damn thing. And so I can't say that is factually what's going on. I just can say that seems like it's probably what's going on, and we need evidence to support that's what's going And it's not. I'm at a point where I can't get the evidence. I can continue to stack more personal stories, and I can continue to accumulate other people's experiences, and say, more and more people are seeing this exact same pattern. Already, I've got a couple hundred people reporting the same sort of stuff. Most people, because of the current environment, because of the current rhetoric, they will automatically assume that this is associated with the overall condition that's flying around out there. Supposedly. Actually, there's no proof. Because if you look at the lungs, if you look at the x-rays and the CAT scans of the lungs, they're totally different. So it's not the same thing. And in fact, it seems to be bacterial. We're talking about bacterial pneumonia here. We're not talking about any kind of viral, as far as I can tell. So it presents kind of like a viral thing, but it actually appears to be a bacterial infection caused by a toxic irritant. Or the conditions for bacterial infections are created by exposure to a toxic irritant that's in the air. Whatever the case is, it's serious issues, and people are getting very sick, and people are, and I'm not aware of anyone who actually has had the injection who has had this problem yet. But on the other hand, I kind of have cut off most of the people because, already the government's asking people to report. We had just this week both Austria and Australia, so you can't get confused even if you're an American, because it's both places, are actually literally locking people into concentration camps as of this week. They are arresting people and throwing them into quarantine camps with double barbed wire guard dogs, guard towers, and crematoriums right next door. These are concentration camps. There's no question. You go in, you don't come out. So this is happening. And, this is happening in a lot of places. We just had Germany, like the chancellor or whatever said, by spring, you're either going to be, injected, or you're going to be, survived and be cured, or you're going to be dead. And that's by spring, that's all we're going to have is people who are injected, survivors, or dead. And they're talking about concentration camps. And so, this is getting very, very serious. And I don't trust people who are stupid enough to take this thing. They didn't do their research. They say they did, but their research involved listening to the news. It involved being told that there were documents without actually looking at the documents. Because if they looked at the documents, they would see the documents said something more or different than what they were told the documents said. Because guess what? I went and looked at the goddamn documents. Which anyone can do. It's on the, these things are on the web. These are like official documents from the government, and they say it's not like we said on TV. And so obviously all these people, we know and you don't know. So I'm quite concerned because this is this is a situation where you've got these are the people who will narc. These are the people who failed to understand that this is a civil rights issue, that this is an issue of personal sovereignty, that this is, the most heinous thing that's happened since World War II, at least in the Western world, and that it is the same thing, but on a much grander scale as what happened. That this is the same thing that was done to the Gypsies and the Jews and the Poles and the Czechs and all these people who were the undesirables. This was the same thing, and that people narked on them then, and and they were put in concentration camps then, and so on. And it's the same exact situation. And these people don't see themselves as playing the role of the Nazis, but they are. And so seeing this coming well in advance, and knowing from years of being with these people that, I can't, as much as I love many of them, I can't trust them. They've already been untrustworthy over the last 20, 30 years. And in a situation like this, I don't expect them to be trustworthy at all. They have their thoughts, and they think that they're right and righteous, and they're going to do their thing, and they're not going to necessarily respect anybody else. They weren't there When you need help, they aren't there. When they need help, they expect the world. And they're narcs. They're narcs. And so I've pretty much, disappeared. I've ghosted these individuals in my life, even though some of them I feel very, very great feelings for. I've ghosted them. So I don't know what's happening in their lives. I don't know what they're experiencing because I can't trust them to have an honest conversation. And the current situation has forced me into making choices between, who can I truly trust, in a situation like this? Who will stand by me? I mean, holy crap, I just went through the whole situation with my wife, the death of my wife. And, it became very clear who you can trust and who you can't trust. And, I don't see any reason to maintain relationships with those who are completely untrustworthy. No matter how nice a person they technically are and how they may just not mean ill, but they do ill, so even if they are just naive or ignorant or thoughtless or callous or selfish or whatever it is that's driving them, not necessarily inherently evil, but just, oblivious and thoughtless, at the same time, is that never comes to anything good. And so there's no good reason to continue to associate with people who you know it's sooner or later they're going to stab you in the back. And so, I've begun to definitely make sure that the most dangerous people are not encouraged to continue to come around. So I don't know what's happening to them. It would be very interesting to know. I know that, amongst the people I do have contact with, this is hitting a lot of people, and it's hitting them hard, and it's very ugly, and it's taking very bad turns for a lot of them. So I figured I'd pop in here, and I would give you this alert. I would present you with a abbreviated form of all the information that I've actually been able to put together, all the data points that I've put on the wall. I don't know that I will actually be able to prove what this is, and I don't know that if I can prove anything about it that we could really do anything about it, except for assume that if it's going to be in the environment, we're going to be exposed to it. If we're going to be exposed to it, there's some risk and some danger from being exposed to it, but there are things that can be done, from immune system stimulation to making sure you're up on your vitamins and everything, to some of these other compounds, the horsey compound, the horsey molecule, and these other things, the glutathione, the N-acetylcysteine, and the C60, which are your choice whether you indulge of those or not. But those are what people are talking about, and that is what a lot of people have been using, and they have seen positive results. So I'd say it's worth looking into. Do a Google search. Inform yourself. See what you think about it. But that's what people have been reporting to me is, it has been useful to them. It has produced good results to them. Other than that, I don't know what to tell you. I can say that today we definitely, I think, broke into new territory as far as the financial thing goes. Since we last talked approximately 2 weeks ago, and I said, hey, Evergrande's collapsed and we got the bond thing. There's been this whole tug of war. The bond yields have been spiking, which means people are selling bonds. And there's been stock prices that are going up and down, extreme volatility, and we've not had this is unusual activity. And we had silver and gold kind of going up. Now they've been crashed down again, which I anticipated. And I said, I didn't know whether they would have time to do it, but I knew that we were at a panic point, and if they could do anything, they would pull out all the stops to crush cryptos, gold, and silver. And I would not be shocked. Silver's sitting at 23 something right now. I would not be shocked if it goes down to $12. I wouldn't be shocked if it goes down to $6. I wouldn't be shocked if it goes down to 50 cents. Now, you won't be able to buy anything for that price, but I wouldn't be shocked. in this desperate effort to try to stave off this financial calamity that's developing. Well, today things ran out of all control. They had to actually shut down the bond market briefly because the Fed wasn't able to buy as fast as people wanted to sell, and then they managed to, kind of shut things down, and then they came out with their bond actual sale, and they cleaned, they bought all the bonds and so on and so it looks good, and it managed to pull things back, and so there was these desperation moves were launched to stave things off today, but this morning they were completely running out of all control. Everything was falling apart this morning, and they basically have taped it up. Who knows whether they'll hold tomorrow? We don't know. Now, of course, with Thanksgiving weekend and so on, I don't really expect a lot more. We might see something happen through this weekend. Most likely, what I would say is that with these holiday weekends, if they're going to manipulate the market, it's a perfect time to manipulate the market. So we actually may see some contrary motion as they take this fact that everybody's off having a good time, or everybody's off running around buying Christmas presents, or everybody's off doing whatever, and they're not necessarily paying attention to the market or trading on the market. They may choose to take this time to try to, push things down to make things normal again. I don't think for a second that it's going to hold. I think that come, Monday, Cyber Monday, and immediately thereafter, we're going to start seeing a lot of stuff just start popping again. So we are seeing the signs. We're seeing the cracks. We're seeing things break to pieces. I would personally say, on an emotional level, we passed a point of no return today. Now, how long they're going to be able to fight it? How long they're going to be able to put it off? How long they're going to be able to paper this over? Not long. They're already having trouble doing it. Now, I'm sure they'll make every effort, and I'm sure that they will have some modest success, maybe, unless things really blow up. They'll have, a while. But we're talking now in terms of, so many weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or less, maybe as much as 1 or 2 weeks. No way to know, no way to time it, but we can see that things want to break. The market is, the whole idea of that people start walking, if last January people started walking for the exit, and if this last October they were jogging towards the exit, maybe even running towards the exit, they are now sprinting towards the exit as of today. Now, that's not the same as a stampede. We're not over the top into a panic yet, but the sense of urgency today escalated another notch, and you can now smell the fear and the impending panic starting to take hold in the market. Whether that can be averted, we'll know. Who knows? We'll see. Ultimately, no, it can't. Ultimately, no, it can't. It's going to be stopgap measures all the time until it finally blows up. Who knows when that will be, but that's where we are, and so we're definitely going to probably see. I know the rest of the world is trying to go back into lockdown, probably very unjustifiably, especially since most of the people who are perishing are in fact the people who've received the stuff. We have reports coming back on that, and the mortality is definitely elevated, though there is also mortality in the people who have not taken the substance. And I can't swear that what I just described is what's causing it, because I don't have detailed information. I would have to get the detailed information and be able to compare it and see whether it fit the pattern or not, and they're not necessarily presenting detailed information. They are assuming that it is viral, and they're not actually checking for any virus. So, if they're not going to check, unless somebody comes out and explains, I felt this way, and then it developed into this, and then it developed into that, and it matches, then we can suspect that maybe this sort of thing is going on all over the world. Right now, it's impossible to know. The one thing I can say is that, if you look at patterns, the patterns aren't matching. And so it's not what they're claiming it is. At least in my opinion, it's not. Of course, I'm not a medical person, and I'm not allowed to give medical advice, and I'm trying not to do anything like give actual dosages or anything, or suggest that you take anything. What I'm suggesting is you pay attention to your environment, and if you find yourself meeting this pattern, you might want to do some research on certain subject matters that other people have found success with, and then you need to make your own personal decision and consult with your doctor or whatever you feel is appropriate in your situation. However, this pattern is appearing, and it's doing a lot of damage. And a lot of people are not doing so well. And whatever it may be, it is a point of some concern. Take it for what it's worth. And, make up your own mind, make up your own decisions. Like I said, I don't personally, there's nothing in it diagnostically to fit the pattern of what the officialdom might claim it to be. It's quite different than that. Even their own diagnostics don't show support for what they're claiming it to be. So I don't believe it is that. But what it is, I cannot say. I cannot prove, because we just don't know. I need samples. I need evidence. I don't have evidence. I only have patterns, and I have stories, and I have, that sort of thing. So, take it for what it's worth. We are definitely, we've had confirmation from a lot of countries now that we can definitely say we're in the die-off. Mortality rates on all causes are elevated in most countries between 15 and 30% over previous year or normal years or whatever. And that's pretty much across the Western world now, and actually probably even much higher than that, because I think there's a lot of things going unreported. So, whatever it is that things have started in earnest. The financial collapse has started in earnest. This die-off has started in earnest by whatever cause you want to attribute it to. And the credit freeze has, I believe, because the bond markets are in turmoil, and it's spreading. It continues to spread from, all the way back in whatever it was, late July, August, when Evergrande first ran into its trouble, till now. There's been a consistent spread of this credit contagion, and it's hitting more and more things. The problem with that is, of course, that at any particular moment, it could just suddenly break the camel's back. The one straw that breaks the camel's back could come at any moment. And the worst case scenario, it circles the world within 24 hours. Or it can continue just as it's been, plodding out month by month, getting consistently worse over time. And, the whole thing may take months or even another year for it to fully manifest. And there's no way for any one of us to actually say. I would say that at the speed that it's going, don't expect it to take very long. But it could easily take another 2 months. It could easily take another 2 months. Or it could easily happen this weekend. There's just no way to know. There's just no way to guess. At some point something will trip and things will go insane. Will that be this weekend? Who knows? I don't know. We've got, the December coming, and we've got the whole debt ceiling here in the U.S. that they got to address. It's not clear what they're going to do with that. We got a new, whole transition, or the whole thing with the Fed, and a lot of people are rather disappointed by the Fed choice. So that's sowing uncertainty into the market. The already uncertain market is sowing more uncertainty into that market. We had the supposed release of fuel from the various strategic petroleum reserves, and now we're hearing it's only heavy sour crude, and it's less than a 1 day's supply stretched out over 6 months, which means it does nothing. The amount of transportation fuels that come out of heavy sour crude are minimal. So we're not talking any gasoline or jet fuel or anything like that. We're talking maybe some diesel fuel, and then things like asphalt and tar and stuff. So it's useless. It's pure political theater. And as much as they've gotten people all over the world to follow suit and engage in the same theater, it all means nothing. and the market recognized that today, and oil prices shot up, a bunch, and in response to that. So basically, people are saying, we can see through your non-reaction reaction. It's all just for sound bites. It's all just for theater, and people saw that and said, it's meaningless. So let's, things are only going to get worse, and so prices shot up a bit. And of course, bring them back down, go out and shut back up again. Again, the volatility. We live in a market where we live in a world where they manipulate the market to try to make it as even as possible. And so when you see very high volatility, we've never seen that for 20 some odd years, and particularly not for the last 10 to 15 years. It's been managed out of the market. And so now suddenly we are seeing high volatility. And we're seeing over normal volatility, so like over 3% swings, 3.1, 3.5, 3.6% swings, which are considered extreme swings, even under a normal market, an uninfluenced market. Those would be considered extreme swings. So we're seeing extreme swings, and we're seeing them on a daily basis, and we're seeing them go, up and then get smashed right back down, and then come right back up, and this extreme volatility. This is a sign of nervousness. This is a sign of things breaking apart. This is an argument in between two factions. One who wants the price to go up, one who wants the price to go down, and they're fighting. So we're in kind of a consolidation period. Who's going to win? And we don't know who's going to win. It's just we're in this very strong fighting period, which shows that the status quo is broken. And it's unclear that there's any way to get the status quo back. So at that point, yes, at some point it's going to fall apart. At some point it's going to fall apart because the confidence is broken. But we just, again, don't know when. It could take months for this to work out, or it could all happen instantly. So I maintain that, the educated guess still looks to essentially the end of February, March sometime, or the beginning of February, basically the month of February. The picture should be much clearer by then. We probably will have had one or more major crises by then. We should see a lot of this health issues come to a head. We should see some political issues come to a head. We'll probably see the financial issues at least get sizably worse, if not, in fact, start to break things. All these and we're probably going to see some starvation start in seriousness in this country. We already have to some degree, but we're going to get much more serious because that's already in the supply chain. So that's coming whether we like it or not. So we're going to see some of that sort of stuff all by that time period. What is it specifically going to take for things to break? I have no idea. But but we're in that point, and it seems that things are being encouraged along certain lines. We are being encouraged to become ill and to perhaps shuffle off this mortal coil by new means. I would surmise, I would suppose. And you certainly you do well to work to verify what I just said. Try amongst your own friends and your family and your own observation of your own environment and paying attention to what's going on around you and doing your own research and looking up your own stuff and consulting with your medical professionals and so on if you think that they're worth talking to. Figure it out. Figure out whether I'm wrong or right. I could be wrong. I could be right. I don't know. I don't know myself yet. But I think it's worth mentioning it. I think it's worth mentioning it. Because if I'm right, it's very serious. If I'm not right, I'm not right by cause. If I fail to be right, I've mistaken the cause. But the condition is still there. The condition is undeniably there. And then it's very serious. If I'm right, and the cause is what I say it is, then it's very serious, and it's still an issue. So it behooves you to do your own homework on it and see what decisions you can come to on that score. like I said, is that yeah, I would say one of the things you can do is follow Cliff High on Twitter. Is Cliff is CLIF underscore HIGH at Cliff High underscore High. That's his address, and he has the current protocol tagged at the top of his feed. So if you go to his page, the very first thing that's there is tagged is the protocol that people are using that works. And that's where I've gotten it, and I've done my own research on top of that, and then I've had people who've done those things and then reported to me what their experiences were, and it's been generally positive. So if there's new information, generally speaking, that's where it's going to be, and you're probably going to hear it there first. So I definitely take advantage of that. I'll just write it down here real quick, so in case you so there's the address, and there's where it's at, and look at his pinned post right at the top, and stay informed. Make your do your own research, make your own choices, but you need to stay informed. Things are happening very, very fast. Hopefully this will go up easily, and there are some other things I definitely want to talk about. I've been meaning to talk about. Hopefully I will be able to talk about. But things are getting very crazy here right at the moment. I got all kinds of different projects. So hopefully I'll be back soon.